It's common knowledge that bad experiences in childhood can cause serious problems later in life. Abuse, neglect, exposure to violence, substance abuse, and other things that we call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, they impact everything from brain development, learning, mental health. They can even give you migraines, cancer, and autoimmune disease. But if you ask me, the worst damage from ACEs shows up in the way we seek and create romantic relationships, the unavailable people, the people we just met, the addicts, the people who aren't reliable, the people who are just angry, and we become deeply attached. We date them, we marry them, we have children with them, we get in fights with them, we leave them, or we get left by them, and then we maybe become desperate to make them come back, or desperate to make them stay away. And because of this, we live long stretches of our lives lonely and frustrated. I would know, as someone with an ACE score of 8, I fit one of the classic profiles of adults who grew up around alcoholism and addiction. I was the responsible kid. I helped the younger kids, I earned money, and I got straight A's at school. And I had good friendships with girlfriends. But when boys came into the picture, I just degenerated. I got depressed and irresponsible, and I gained weight, and I was obsessed. Now, I was still a high achiever, and that helped me look kind of okay, but I was on a roller coaster around relationships, and this went on through a lot of my adult life. My recovery was gradual and spotty at first because the normal people solutions that most people use, like therapy or medication, that didn't help me. When I figured out what did help, everything changed. And now I teach other people with childhood PTSD how they can cut the drama and recover too. It's less mysterious than you might think. It turned out that the underlying problem for me, and you can decide for yourself if you're similar to me, it had 3 parts. First, like most people with childhood PTSD, my brain became easily dysregulated, and this made me emotionally reactive at times. I came off as a little too needy or a little too mean, and at critical moments, I'd lose my best judgment. Second, I had some serious gaps where my attachment mechanism was supposed to be, and so being single was really stressful. I tended to kind of rush into relationships, and then getting out of them was almost unbearable, even when I didn't even like the other person. And finally, I had a messy sense of right and wrong. I had conflicting ideas about love, sex, courtship, responsibility, expectations, how to care for myself, how a person like me should comport herself. Now, I don't know why, but the ACEs literature doesn't say much about dating, sex, and marriage. Experts tend to be focused on things that they can help you fix, and God knows it's just about impossible to help another person who's stuck in a negative relationship pattern. But the partnering part of us gets so damaged by early trauma, and healing has the potential to completely change the course of our lives. So of the many miracles in my life, the one that changed my life the most happened on the day I stopped having crap relationships. Now, at the time, I had no idea why the same old hurtful, humiliating problems kept happening, and in fact, they were getting worse, and I couldn't make it stop, even when other things in my life were going well. But admitting that my old ideas and behaviors were not working at all was the very first thing I did that opened the door to transformation. And if you've ever had to admit this kind of horrible failure, you know how the first seconds or so, it's like dying. But very quickly, a new feeling fills you up, a sense of surrender and peace, and then, thank God, possibility, even hope. When you have childhood PTSD, everything depends on your willingness to get real and take action, and then keep taking action. Negative patterns, I happen to know, are very sticky. They're hard to get rid of, and even when they're gone, they just try like hell to come back. When signs of improvement began to be visible in my life, my friends started asking me how I did it. And I took their calls, and I taught them my techniques, and soon I was sharing my principles with their friends who'd call because they heard I could help break their trauma patterns. In 2016, I started my blog, Crappy Childhood Fairy, to share my techniques with more people. And this year, I released my first online course, Healing Childhood PTSD. I teach people how to identify the emotional dysregulation that stems from childhood PTSD, and then to re-regulate so that behavior change and happiness can take root. Now, in a regulated state, it becomes possible to deprogram yourself. That's a strong word, I know, but deprogramming is exactly what has to happen when we've gotten stuck in an unconscious, repetitive, and destructive cycle of behaviors. Now, behaviors are at least partly driven by beliefs, and when we have childhood PTSD, a lot of our beliefs came from trauma experiences. Trauma beliefs are cultural, they're family learned, and they're reinforced by our friends who likely also have unhealed childhood PTSD. We usually know what we're doing wrong and we can try to make ourselves act normal, but this kind of symptom fix is usually only temporary. Real change demands that we identify those trauma-driven beliefs and begin to replace them. Normal people seem to just know this stuff, but those of us programmed by trauma usually need stronger, clearer guidelines that may feel, at first, countercultural or unnatural or even radical. But that is how to deprogram and then reprogram yourself, and it works. So here are 10 common trauma-driven beliefs, followed by an explanation of how they ruin your relationship life. Switch genders if you need to, and see if they apply to you. Number 1, you believe that you attract unavailable people. It's not a problem, actually, whom we attract. I attract mosquitoes, right? But I don't sleep with them. The problem is when we're attracted to unavailable people, whether it's because they're married, addicted, immature, not into your gender, or just plain not into you. And if this happens once, it's a terrible disappointment. If it happens all the time, it's blocking you from any real kind of love. Now, we're often attracted to people who are, whether we see it or not, about the same as ourselves, and it's we who may not be available for the intensity and risk and responsibility of being in real mutual relationships, especially what with all the dysregulated emotions. Taking the blame off of other people for our actions is the first step of deprogramming. Number 2, you believe that sex is how you find out if you're compatible with someone. In the post-sexual revolution world, this is completely accepted by most people I know as just the way it is. But for people with childhood PTSD, sex is more often how we bond with people who are not compatible. And then we waste years trying to retroactively turn them into the person we hoped they were in the first place. Recovery sometimes demands that we live by a different, more careful set of rules that helps us avoid the same old mistakes, even when our best thinking is online. Number 3 is a belief I hear often where people say, I'm always exactly where I'm supposed to be. Now, I do get the basic idea that even hard times can help us grow, but it can also be a rationalization used by people in abusive, rejecting, or intolerable relationships to explain why they can't or won't leave, and to perpetuate a fantasy of being loved on some unseen level. Other variations include, but we had this incredible past life together, or God told me to just love him through this, or we're here to learn a lesson from each other. Now, it's really difficult for most people to face the truth of their lives, especially when they're in a rut. But having a trusted mentor in this area can really help us avoid these kind of mental traps. Number 4 is when you believe, he was hurt before, and I think that's why he's afraid of commitment. Now, whatever a person's history, if they are unable or unwilling to commit, there it is. Understanding or guessing at the source of their feelings still won't get you loved. Moving on is sometimes the most direct route to finding love. Number 5, you believe that she had a lot of childhood trauma and that's why she self-medicates. The old phrase self-medication. Here's the truth. All alcoholism or addiction is self-medication, except in maybe some implausible situation where drugs were forced or given to a helpless person for a long time. So whatever you call it, serious drinking and using make a person unreliable and limited in terms of intimacy and not a good dating prospect. Now, when it's a close family member or a spouse that's got substance problems, there are more compelling reasons to stay in their lives. But either way, you may want to consider going to Al-Anon. It's for families and friends of alcoholics and addicts, and it's very helpful. Number 6 is when people say, I realized my ex is an abusive narcissist, and I want to send him this book I found on Amazon about abusive narcissists. I hear this a lot. Now, I know it's so hard to stop fixing other people as a means to gain control of an out-of-control situation. But if you're diagnosing an ex as a sick and terrible person and you think that you should spend money on him or make contact in order to help him, your trauma brain is doing the thinking. Number 7 is the thing that people say that, oh, we're just friends. Now, there are in fact exes or future romantic relationships where this is true, but there are many where A, one person is pining away for the other one and is too scared to declare their feelings because it would be icky to the other person, or B, one or both of you are using the other person to fill up time until real love shows up, pretending that the new significant other who shows up will actually love these friends too, which they almost certainly won't. It's all a crappy dynamic that delays your healing and puts up an I'm not available force field around you. And people who would make good partners can intuitively sense the force field, so they stay away. So think about it. The only people who are going to ignore this force field are the unavailable ones and the angry people. And that's how they get into your life. Number 8, have you ever heard this one? I need closure. Now, this makes sense to the trauma-driven mind, but in real life it means I want an excuse to reconnect. Now, you already know what I'm going to say. So let's talk about number 9. It's when somebody says, this person is toxic. Now, there's toxic stress and toxic emotion, but the concept of a toxic person, I say, is not real. It seems that way when you resent someone and lack the inner balance to deal with them without getting emotionally dysregulated. It's more realistic to acknowledge that you have a toxic reaction because you're not strong enough, yet anyway, to stay calm around a particular person or to stay away from them altogether. So the best strategy is to work on that. Number 10, I hear this too, there are no good men or women or marriages out there. Now, I used to think this, that all the good men were taken and I'd better just stay stuck in a crappy relationship. Now I'm sorry I wasted so many years on this kind of trauma-driven thinking, pushing good relationships away, filling up my life with bad relationships, and wondering why on earth this kept happening. Now I know, and it's helped me grow happy and enter into a solid marriage and enjoy my life at last. So I have a whole set of techniques and guidelines that anyone can use to heal dysregulation and trauma thinking, and that's in my first course, Healing Childhood PTSD. I also have a new course coming out in early 2019 called Dating and Relationships for People with Childhood PTSD. They are really good companion pieces, or you can just take one, and you can sign up for them at the blog crappychildhoodfairy.com. Take heart, everyone. Healing is possible.